Good afternoon. Let's call today's Board of Trustees meeting to order at what time is it? 4 p.m. Trudy, if you could please call the roll.
Lakowski,
Present.
Pettit,
Here.
Acton, Donnelly, here. Eastmo, here. Sheets,
Here.
Steiner, here. Swanson, Zibble.
Here. Okay, thank you everyone. If we could stand for the pledge. Allegiance to the flag. Mr. Zibble, would you please read the mission statement?
Sir. Laketran is committed to providing quality public transportation services to all Lake County residents and special emphasis meeting the transportation needs of seniors and people with disabilities.
Thank you very much. Are there any public comments in the room today? Seeing none. At this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to our legal counsel for the election of the board's officers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, as always, in the April meeting in January, the health rules regulations call for nominations for officers of the Laketran board. And those two positions are president and vice president. Mr. President, will be blessing if you'd like to open nominations for the floor position of president. Okay. Is there anyone on the board who wishes to nominate anyone for the position of president?
I would nominate Brian Kapkowski.
Okay, Mr. Falkowski has been nominated for president. Are there any further nominations? Motion to close the nominations. So moved. Moved by Mr. Zibble. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
In favor of Mr. Falkowski for president. Please respond by stating aye.
Aye.
Okay. No one opposed? Okay. Mr. Falkowski is hereby elected president of the next year of the Laketran Board of Trustees. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, if you would allow open nominations to the floor for vice president at this time.
Of course.
Are there any nominations for vice president?
Nominate Mr. Sheets.
Mr. Sheets has been nominated for vice president. Any other second? I'm sorry, any further nominations, Mr. Sheets? Or any other further nominations?
President, I'd like to nominate Doug Zibble.
Okay. Any other nominations for the position of vice president? Okay. Is there a motion to close the nominations at this time?
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. We begin in the process here with the rules of order. Rules and regulations of practice. We start with the first name that's been nominated. All in favor, Mr. I'm sorry. Okay. All in favor of Mr. Sheets as vice president? Aye. Okay. 3 in favor. All those opposed, Mr. Sheets as vice president? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. Mr. Falkowski, we've got a 3 and 3 vote here, and you serve as the tiebreaker, and that's Mr. Sheets as vice president.
I'm sorry, say the last part again. Voting for or against?
You would be voting for or against Mr. Sheets as vice president. That's for vice president.
I would be voting against.
Okay. All right, we now move on to any nomination. Mr. Zibble then nominated. All in favor of Mr. Zibble?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Is that related to someone? Mr. Rucker? No, I'm in favor. Oh, Mr. Zibble? Yes. Okay. All right. We got 4 in favor, Mr. Zibble. 2 opposed. Mr. Zibble then is elected as vice president of the board. Thank you, Mr. President.
Sure. Thank you very much. At this time, the first item on our agenda is the approval of the Laketran Board of Trustees meeting minutes of December 19th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve them?
So moved.
Motion made by Ms. Pishmo. Is there a second? seconded by Ms. Nunley. Trudy, if you can please call the roll.
Epic,
Yes.
Nunley. Yes. Pismo. Yes. Sheets.
Yeah.
Stanger. Yes. So.
Yes.
At this time, is there a motion to approve the Laketran Board of Trustees special board meeting minutes of January 12th, 2023?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Zibble. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Stanger. Trudy, if you could please call the roll.
Epic,
Yes.
Nunley. Same. Pismo. Yes. Sheets.
Yes.
Stanger. Yes. So.
Yes.
Thank you. Our meeting minutes have been approved. Is there a motion to enter into executive session to prepare for negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment pursuant to section 121.22(G)(4) of the Ohio Revised Code? Motion made by Ms. Nunley. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Stanger. Trudy, if you could please call the roll.
Epic,
Yes.
Nunley. Yes. Pismo. Yes. Sheets.
Yes.
Stanger. Yes. Zibble.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. This time the board will enter into executive session at 4:05 p.m. We will invite our legal counsel and CEO to stay in this executive session.
For our YouTube viewers, we will be back online once executive session is concluded.
Oh, does Lisa stay for any of these?
No.
Excuse me.
So. Total operating year to date through the end of November is $32,811,965. We had budgeted to be at $32,207,363. Our total operating expense, we're at $18,045,623. Budgeted to be about $585,667. Our estimated capital expense, just due is at about $6 million. With any conference due about $13 million. We budgeted taking in depreciation one versus our actual versus our budgeted expenses. Then on the next page just gives a little bit more detail. Classify everything, the middle columns and those important, that's where we are actually today. Basically just defines the numbers that I just went over. So the 32.8 million is basically the majority of our sales tax. And then we did have federal and state, and then for 2023, you'll see that go away. I mean, it won't go away, it's just gonna go way down because of all the grants that we received regarding the pandemic. And then for the expense side, we are at $18,045,623 year to date. Again, majority of our expenses are going to be wages and benefits due to us being a service industry. But we do have other expenses, obviously, like services and software, supplies, utilities, and insurance, and then purchase transportation. And in general, those are all slightly less than what we had budgeted, just due to that we're still seeing some of the in 2022. Obviously, towards the end of the year, we've seen that pick up. So I think by 23, we should be back to some type of a normal. And then on the third page, this is basically just defining our cash balance. Our operating is about $8 million. The capital, these are expenses that we still owe for capital from 2022 and prior years, because obviously capital carries over longer than a year, depending on the types of projects. Other is just our cash balance, and we're the 40 cents to designate for that to go to 35.9, and then our STS cash balance at 533 for a total cash balance of 47. Okay. This is kind of our overview of our capital. This kind of defines the prior 2002 with the federal, the state, and local. And this is just This chart represents in total. So obviously some of our local for prior 22 and 22, some of that cash has been spent year to date. But that was kind of to even it out so you can see the total 100%. When you're breaking it out by federal, state, and local. So, and this is from prior to 2022 through 2026. And those are just things that we kind of know right now that are in the works. This could obviously change in future years. Next chart. If that concludes for our operating, our cash balance and all that. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer that regarding our normal operating balance. If not, I'll move on to the STS. STS basically, this just kind of breaks out most of the revenue, or the majority of the revenue is going to be from fares, our wages and benefits, and you can clearly see on this one because the amounts are smaller, but you can see from 21 to 22 and where we budgeted to be how it has improved just due to the pandemic. So our total revenue year to date for 22 is obviously 77,600. And our expenses are at $155,874. So we're a little bit less than what we said we would be on expenses by 27,000. And we're a little short on the revenue side by 107. But I think again, 2023, you're going to see that pandemic piece kind of go away. So, is there any questions I can answer? And that concludes. Thank you.
Any questions or comments for Lisa? At this time, is there a motion to approve the November 2022 operating and STS financial statements, subject to audit and capital plan review?
So moved.
Motion made by Ms. Pishmo. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Stanger. Trudy, if you could please call the roll.
Epic,
Yes.
Donnelly,
Yes.
Peacewell,
Yes.
Sheets,
Yes.
Stanger,
Yes.
Civil.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. At this time, we'll move on to our Title VI program.
All right, good evening. So I'll talk to you briefly about Laketran's Title VI plan. So Section 601 of Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act states that any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance shall not discriminate on the grounds of race, color, or national origin. So Laketran receives money from the Federal Transit Administration, therefore abide by this Title VI rule, and the specific DOT regulations are 49 CFR 21, which requires that Laketran submit a Title VI program plan every 3 years. Our last plan expires on January 31st, and we have to submit the new plan by February 1st. So the regulations require that the Title VI plan has 7 required elements. That we post a notice to the public that we comply with Title VI. We post that physically in our headquarters and our 3 transit centers. That we post a copy of how to submit a Title VI discrimination complaint. That's on our website. The list of all transportation related Title VI investigations or complaints or lawsuits for the last years. We have 0 to reports, and we also summarize our public participation activities, which is a lot of what Julia's department does. Just to jazz up the slide, I have pictures of the Title VI notice to the public that are posted at the Frank J. Polivka and Wickliffe Transit Centers. The last couple things in the Title VI plan, a lot of the work of developing a plan goes to how we engage with limited English proficient communities in Lake County. So in Lake County, we do have enough Spanish speakers that have limited English proficiency, so we do translate some of our documents to make it easier for those members of our community to access Laketran services. We also are required to provide a breakdown of the demographics of our patient advisory committee, and we provide information on our fixed route system standards. The Title VI plan was uploaded to Govenda for your review. And so in conclusion, Laketran is required to update its Title VI plan every 3 years and submit it to FTA. It requires approval of our Board of Trustees as the last step. So it's my recommendation that the Board of Trustees approve the attached resolution.
Questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve resolution 2023-001 adopting Laketran's Title VI program?
So moved.
Motion made by Ms. Stinger, is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Nunley. Trudy, if you could please call the roll.
Kevin?
Yes.
Nunley? Yes. Islam? Yes. Sheets?
Yes.
Singer? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. At this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Ben.
All right. I am excited to say today we have a recommendation to approve a resolution to enter into a contract with Ozan for the renovation and expansion of headquarters. So we are on schedule. Always important in a government procurement and construction process is being on schedule. Actually, we're a little bit ahead of schedule because Ozan has already said they are in acceptance of the contract that was in the bid documents that Brandon had already proposed. So usually there's a long process, 30 to 60 days of contract negotiations, which is already well underway. Nothing has been signed, obviously, but they have agreed to the standard contract. So this is the slide I presented in November. This was the estimate. Total estimate was $24,523,400. We had the funds to match it. We had to overmatch the grant a little bit. The reason I show you this is because I'm also very happy to report that the actual bids came in well under that. So this number includes a couple of things that we're going to talk about. But the main component is this engineer's estimate, which is the base bid, alternate 1/1A. Those are 2 different alternates, and alternate 2. So the engineer's estimate that was published was $22,657,380. Sorry. Ozan came in at $19,490. So well below the engineer's estimate, which is really great news. What was weird or a little unusual was we expected to get more than 1 bid. We normally get more than 1. This is a complicated project. In a lot of conversation with Bill from CT, it really is, contractors are struggling with labor like everybody, and they just didn't have the manpower to bid. So, but we got 1 bid, which is great. It is perfectly legal. There's no issues with us only getting 1 bid because the project was completely public. There's not any problems with that. These numbers don't include 2 things, which are a thing called furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and project contingency. Those are included in this number, but they're not part of Ozan's actual bid because they're kind of separate components from the bid. So when we add those 2 things in, and I'll kind of explain what those are as we go, the total number we're asking for, you'll see in the documentation today, is $21,864,000. So that includes the base bid. The base bid is the building. That includes all the office renovation, office expansion, and everything. Alternate 1 and 1A are the bus storage piece behind the building. So alternate 1 was the bus storage piece with a metal exterior. Alternate 1A was the bus storage piece with a concrete block exterior. After discussion, the committee felt that 1A was better. It's a better construction method. It will last us a longer time. The cost difference wasn't significant enough to sort of stipulate a change. The metal was put in several years ago as a cost saving measure, but as the price of steel has gone up, it no longer saves money that's sort of worth it. So the recommendation is for the concrete block construction. And then alternate 2 is to replace the driveway at the end of the project. They'll rip out the main driveway and replace it. Contingency of 10% is included in here. That number is $1.94 million. And then FF&E is furniture, fixtures, and equipment at $425,000. So I'll go over those two in detail here real quick. So the contingency is money added to the project in case something happens. It doesn't necessarily mean something's going to happen. It's likely in a renovation project something will happen. And by something, I mean you open a wall and there's a pipe in it that you didn't expect, or they go to dig something and there's a thing there that they don't expect. So the committee talked about this with Bill, and they recommended 10% along with Bill, saying that's the appropriate number of contingency for a renovation. It doesn't get spent unless approved by the owner's rep and staff. And so it's not something that we just kind of spend willy-nilly. There's a very stringent process that's involved in that expenditure, and the Special Projects Committee will likely be involved in helping monitor that. We do have a change request log that'll be given to the board every month, so you guys can kind of see where that is running. And it's retained by Laketran. So this is not money that we tell the contractor exists. This is not money that is in the contractor's contract. This is money that we hold as sort of the backup plan if something happens. And we talked about the percentage amount in the Special Projects Committee. And I don't want to, I know Lane and Chuck can kind of answer any questions, but this is the number that kind of CT recommended with a renovation project the committee agreed to. And then FF&E is furniture, fixtures, and equipment. This sometimes goes inside the contract with the general contractor. So Ozan sometimes will provide this and it'll be part of their contract. In our case, we can purchase these things off of the state term contracts. So we can get a better price than Ozan can, and we save the markup that the contractor would charge us. This budget is based on the original budget Bowen gave us back in 2019. We did not change it. It stays the same. This is for things like shelving and maintenance, a desk, kind of some different things that aren't necessarily construction materials. And again, we chose to segregate it from the contractor's contract to do it for cheaper. But it still needs to be approved by the board. And so our total that we're requesting tonight is that $21,864. Very happy to say, because the amount is less than expected, it is what we would call fully grant funded, which means the full 80% of the project comes from grants. We don't have to overmatch with local dollars. So the minimum we have to put in from a grant is 20%. We are right at that minimum. It's a great place to be. So the total, as you can see how it rolls up into that, is that $21,864. This next slide I put up here because this was a question the committee asked, which was, okay, if the project costs $864, what does that mean for grants and sort of leftovers? So if, and this is highly unlikely to happen, if we spent the entire 10% of contingency, in theory, we would still have another $1.3 million of grant funds we could access. So those dollars continue to be ours. Once the project is complete and everything is closed out, we will ask the FTA if we can keep those and use them for another project. The FTA won't really consider that until your project is finished. But the main reason I wanted to put this up is to show everyone that we are in a very good financial position for the project, because in the extreme event we went over the contingency, we do have another backup plan. That is incredibly unlikely, like 1% unlikely, but in that 1%, we are sort of protected. And so on January 17th, the Special Projects Committee reviewed and discussed the bid from Ozan. After the discussion and a recommendation from Bill and staff, Special Project Committee unanimously voted to advance this to the board for award. And so I am happy to say that I would like to recommend the board approve resolution 2302 to move forward with the project with concurrence from the Special Projects Committee, CT consultants, and staff. Happy to answer any questions.
First, Mr. Zibble and Mr. Sheets, is there anything you would like to add from the Special Projects Committee?
No. I'm glad to try to address it, answer questions that somebody else would have regarding the recommendation.
Great, so let's open this up for questions for either Ben or Mr. Zippel
Or Bill from CT.
or Bill from CT.
So if we start moving forward with those, when would they be able to be on site, break ground, start moving?
I'll take that one if you don't mind, Ben, since because I'm the owner truck on the project, we're in constant communication with those entities since the bid rolled in November. We talked to them about having pre-construction meetings for the next 2 weeks. We're talking about them, about submitting a contract for the signatures early as this week. Once we get to the pre-construction meeting, we will have a formal schedule published with ensure the board at that time, and we'll know all the particulars. It's difficult for me to tell you the exact same first date, but they'll be on site, but you will know well in advance when they're ready to break the ground.
So they'll start procuring material, like as they go, with the packages, right, start.
First thing to do is release all the subcontractors agreements. Those subcontractors will then start to print shop drawings and performance drawings, which we will have to approve it. That our contractor will have to approve, and at that time, the materials and the starting material ordering starting within 30 days.
It would be possible for us to get, some guess of a model for cash flow and what, each month might look like as we start to put money, because I'm interested in knowing how fast, we can draw it down.
Absolutely. We have opportunity in the pre-construction meetings and request that information, and we will have that for the administration.
Now I have a comment.
Sure.
CT consultants and particularly Mr. Gallagher, they're doing a great job for us. And I appreciate it. They're Johnny on the spot with everything and very good in their communication processes. So, Bill, thank you.
Thank you for the kind words.
Thank you for sharing. Any other questions, comments, statements?
I'll add one more comment, but I just wanted to thank the Special Projects Committee for the amount of time they spent reviewing the project, reviewing the blueprints, understanding everything, asking a lot of good questions. So I think it was a good process, and I appreciate everybody's, extra time commitment on it.
Thank you.
It's true.
Okay. At this time, is there a motion to approve resolution 2023-002, authorizing the CEO or his designee to enter into and execute a contract with Ozane Construction Company Incorporated for the renovation and expansion of Laketran headquarters, including base bid, add alternate 1A, add alternate 2, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and construction contingency at a cost not to exceed $21,864,000. Motion made by Ms. Pishmo and seconded by Mr. Zittle. Trudy, if you could please call the roll.
Becky?
Yes.
Emily? Yes. Eastman?
Yes.
Keats?
Yes.
Stanger?
Yes.
Zibble?
Yes. Thank you, everyone. I'm very pleased to announce that we have unanimously voted to move forward with the headquarters project. At this time, I'll turn the meeting back over to Ben.
So another construction of a little smaller scale. This is for a bus stop at Mentor High School. So Mentor High School approached us about a year ago to say that they really wanted to improve the waiting environment for their students that used Laketran. Mentor High was the first school in Lake County to enact the Transit Go program, which is where the school pays a flat rate for transportation. So to the student, they get a free ride. The school's paying for it in the back end, but it increases student access to transportation. And so we worked with the school to talk about, what their needs were, what our needs were, how that would all lay out. We hired Burgess & Nyepel to do the design process, which has been approved by school administration. On this slide here, you can see blank on the road name. Munson, the road there. The star represents where the shelter will go. And so that is the location of the project. The blueprint to the right is a kind of an outline of what the actual amenities will look like. Generally it's a concrete slab. with a bus shelter, just like the ones that are out front. So it's that kind of silver one. There's some landscaping behind it. Menor schools had some specific plants they wanted for plant reasons. I'm not sure exactly what the reason is why they like certain plants. One of the nice things about this location is, and this actually to drive the cost up a little bit on the front end, but will reduce the cost on the long term, is there is electricity at this site for lighting and a heater that we commonly put in the shelters. It is being connected to the Menor High School Stadium, so we won't actually have a meter that we have to pay any electric costs here, which is good. It does drive the project cost up a little bit because they have to trench all the way to the stadium, but over the long term, it'll be cheaper for us. They do the basic maintenance of the site, including the landscaping. We maintain the transit amenities, so if the shelter gets damaged, we repair that, but we don't have to do landscaping or trash removal or anything like that. Pretty exciting project. Once the design was completed and approved by the schools, we issued an invitation to bid on December 1st. We had a pre-bid meeting that was held on December 12th. We had 4 contractors in attendance. We received 5 bids. The engineer's estimate was $165,000. Very happy to say we came in below that. So Lake County Landscape and Supply came in at $144,200. So they were well below the engineer's estimate. We've had a conversation with them. We actually have previous dealings with them, so we know them well as a contractor, and they're definitely able to complete this work for us. And so the recommendation tonight is to award the contract to Lake County Landscaping and Supply for the construction bid cost of $144,200 with a 10% contingency. I don't expect to use the contingency, but anytime you're digging for a long distance with the electric, we just want it to be safe. But we expect this to come in right at that $144,200. They are, ready to start construction as soon as weather is appropriate and the schools give us clearance. With the schools, sometimes they have a very strict timeline when they want us to work on their properties because of when students are around. So I hope this is the first of a couple more projects like this. We've been trying to really get more shelters out in the community. We've kind of got all the low-hanging fruit knocked out. Sometimes now we have the more difficult projects like this, and they are a little bit more expensive. But we do have specific grant dollars that fund these projects called enhancement money, which we have to spend 1% of our federal allocation on projects like this. So this is a great fit for those dollars that we have to use for projects like this. So happy to answer any questions. Sure.
Can you help me understand why this is like the price of a two-bed condo? Because I think you can go back to the drawing or something, just like walk me through. I understand that, but
Sure.
it seems
Expensive, yeah. The best. Well, I wish I had a really, really good one thing answer. Those little buildings are a ridiculous amount of money. No matter who we buy them from, they're almost $30,000, which is crazy. So that is a significant cost here with the bench and all the stuff. That's around, I think it's like 40 grand for all those things. That sort of light brown area between the plants and the concrete is a small sort of little wall to segregate the plants from the students. And so that's probably the thing that is the most unusual as far as costs in this. We don't normally build little walls like that. They really wanted it to try and highlight the space and keep the kids out of the bushes. So we don't normally build those. We usually just build flat concrete. Yeah, so I mean, they're kids. I imagine they're going to be wherever they want. It's also a little larger than we usually do. So there's one shelter and 2 benches. We usually just do one shelter, but there's a lot of kids that use this at a peak time. There's a bunch of them, so it's a slightly bigger area. So all of those things combined kind of make it a little bit more expensive. There's also a drainage swale there now they kind of have to deal with. So between that and then the electrical, it just has kind of all the markings of a higher priced thing. City Menor also requires 6-inch, I think that it's 6-inch deep concrete instead of 4 for a sidewalk. Trying to remember anything else that stands out. I don't know if Keith, if there's anything else you remember that stands out. Okay. Any other questions for Ben? Is
there a motion to approve resolution 2023-003, authorizing the CEO or his designee to enter into and execute a contract with Lake County Landscaping and Supply for the construction of a bus stop at Menor High School at a cost not to exceed $158,600?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Zibble. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Peacock. Shirley, if you could please call the roll.
Yes.
No. Yes. Sheets.
No.
Stanger. Yes. Sydney.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion has passed for the bus stop. At this time, I'll turn the meeting back over to Ben for the 6-month look ahead.
Thank you. So not a whole lot of changes from last month. In February, we have a uniform contract. I think I've talked about this before, but our current vendor wanted a pretty significant increase. We said no and are putting it out to bid. Everything is on schedule, so we expect to have a contract award in February. The vehicle lift, this is the one going back a while. We had a lift failure. We were originally going to buy it off of state contract. Wasn't available, so we did a procurement. We got responses from, I think, 4 vendors, and Keith is in the process, or 4 products, 5 vendors. Keith is in the process of doing the evaluation on the actual pieces of equipment. So we expect to have that ready for February. The Geauga Transit Agreement, we expect to have that on the agenda for February. We've sent the agreement to Geauga Transit. Brandon drafted it, and we sent it last month, about halfway through the month, so they should have plenty of time. My intention, once we have general agreement on that, is to send it to the board first. The commissioners are slated to approve it before us, so it's possible that this could slip a month, depending on how quick Geauga County reviews it. I don't know. I haven't gotten any communication from them where they're at in the review process. So our objective would still be to have it on for February to try and keep that schedule intact. But it's going to be dependent on when we get the agreement back from Geauga to make sure that everything, Brandon needs time to look at it, and we need to make sure everything is the way it needs to be. In March, we have our routine activity for state grant approval. We will have another approval request for a passenger shelter for AWT. This one is, we've had several meetings with Freedon and AWT about a shelter in front of their new facility on Tyler Boulevard. In this case, the design is being done by CT. They are wrapping up the design, and we will go out to bid for the shelter. We have a budget. Well, not a budget, but we sort of expect this one to come in around $150,000 also. Main contributing factor in this one is there is a lot of sidewalk. Because Tyler Boulevard does not have any sidewalk, there is a good amount of sidewalk to connect to the building to make everything ADA accessible. So I'll be able to answer that question better next month. April, we'll have an approval request for the Public Transit Agency Safety Plan, or PTASP. This is a routine activity that gets approved every month. Every year. In May, we will have passenger shelters at Lake Erie College. So as part of our contract to run shuttle service with them, we are going to do some upgrades on our existing shelter there, serviced by Route 1. That shelter will serve our Route 1 and their shuttle. This one will involve some reconfiguration of what's there and making this a little bit nicer area. We'll have a real-time arrival sign and some other amenities, but it involves a second passenger shelter location on the college campus. So this is the reconstruction of an existing one and then construction of a new one. I'd expect that one to be between 225 and 275. We haven't gotten far enough along in the designs to say exactly where that will be, but you can imagine at the college campus there's a lot of brick and kind of more ornate materials required. In June, we have federal grant authority, which is a routine item that allows us to apply for federal grants. I put July on here just as a reminder that recess is in July this year instead of August. And then in August, we have our bus advertising contract. We go out to bid every 3 to 5 years for the advertising agreement that pays us to have ads on the bus. We are currently assuming that Geauga will be part of the agreement. Obviously, we won't know that for sure till everything is wrapped up, but that would put all of the advertising under one umbrella. It does happen to be the same contractor that works for both us and Geauga, so there shouldn't be a lot of disruption. It's equal advertising. And then we'll have an approval request for snow plowing. We go to bid every 3 to 5 years for snow plowing for all the sites we maintain, which include headquarters, the transit centers, park and rides, etc. Does anybody have any questions on any of those? Be happy to answer anything.
Yeah, I have a question about the bus shelters.
Sure.
If these entities want this, how come they can't bear some of the responsibility? Like the one at our Boulevard or like area, this sort of the contract was mutually agreed on, where is their responsibility?
So this is a set, these are traditionally something that Laketran and all transit agencies pay for because we are essentially mandated to by the feds. So we have to spend 1% of our grant dollars on projects like this. And so that's why usually we bear the responsibility of doing it and then they take over the maintenance of it afterwards.
So what about, kind of piggybacking off Kim's question, when you talked about Lake Erie College, you said, well, it's on a college campus, so it's gonna have to be more ornate and a little nicer. Is there any sort of help with something like that?
We try to not let things go crazy in terms of cost. The general difference is the style of the shelters can vary and have different costs associated with them, and those are sort of up to, you know, what people prefer aesthetically. So there's not really a standard cost though, so it's hard to kind of benchmark and say this one would be more expensive than this one, and that things vary in price a lot. So it's a good question. It's a hard question to answer. Normally these are built on right of way that the entities don't have the ability to sort of build on anyway without city approval, and we don't have to go through that same process. But it's sort of just the standard practice, just like a street light, that we are the ones responsible to install it. Usually I get away with us not maintaining it, but and that's usually their skin in the game, is that we aren't going to do the maintenance of it all the time. We're just going to build it and kind of move on.
This question done. With the maintenance part of it, does that mean cleaning the glass, cleaning the seats, if there's a problem, the damage, the vandalism problem? If they take responsibility for that?
So if there is physical damage to the actual transit amenity, we fix that. So let's say somebody shatters the glass in the shelter, we repair the glass. If somebody like rips a bush out, then it's their job to deal with that. Really, all we do is maintain the transit amenities. We do clean them twice a year. If they prefer to have them cleaned more than that, that's on their sort of their responsibility. And when we clean it, we pressure wash it. We don't you know, sit out there with a bottle of pledge or anything and really go into it real deep. So there's a lot of places. We have some older agreements where we agreed to remove trash. I have not agreed to one of those since I've worked here for 10 years. I don't think it's our job to empty trash. If you want a trash can, we'll provide you one, but I'm not, you know, we're not a trash company. So really it's just replacement of the transit amenities themselves if they get broken.
So it's fair to say we have more capital costs involved in this than maintenance costs.
My general objective is to make the cost of these things as little as possible on an ongoing basis, because that's the money that's hard to get. We're required to spend a certain amount of federal dollars on these things to begin with. So I try to keep them as cheap to operate as possible.
Is it worth it to enter into some kind of warranty with the property owner?
They do have to sign a 30-year, we've given it different names, lease agreement or what's the other term? They do sign an agreement for the 30-year period, because we tell them if we're going to invest federal dollars, this thing has to be here, can't be touched, has to be maintained. We generally just document the space it's in. We could include maintenance requirements in there as part of the agreement also, sure.
You say like for, you know, first 5 years damage, anything like that might be on them.
Okay.
Some type of agreement like that, and then after that it would be a normal wear and tear, however long the glazing is good for, the bench or.
Sure.
Pieces like that.
Yeah, Brandon and I can, I'm sure, come up with something that kind of defers it over time, because those little buildings do have a warranty period. I forget what it is. If it's vandalism, obviously it doesn't cover it, but like for like paint and stuff like that, there is a warranty included. So we could say after the warranty, you know, if you want to paint it, you do it.
If I may argue, it's already relying a lot of responsibility on that.
Yeah, generally our plan is kind of build it and walk away to the extent possible. Good questions. Anybody else? Any other questions?
Any other questions or comments for Ben on the 6-month look ahead? Seeing none, do you want to go to your CEO report?
I will. I put this in here because the project hadn't been awarded by the time we got to this part of the presentation, but we've been awarded the project. So I will say we stayed on schedule with the process. Now, obviously, with the process going forward, we'll keep the board involved. If there's ever a time that you want to review the site, see something or anything like that, just let me know. We'll be happy to make anything available to you for the HQ project. For Geauga Transit, we are still on schedule. I mentioned a little bit earlier, I'm slightly concerned, I would say a small amount of concern about making sure we hit the schedule to have the Geauga County contract or Geauga County commissioners vote on the MOU and then have this board vote on the MOU. As of right now, we are still on schedule. I'd prefer to have the contract in everyone's hands to review it before we bring it for full approval. So I'm going to continue to hope we meet that schedule. As of right now, you know, they've had it for over 15 days, which hopefully is enough time, but we'll kind of see how it goes. I'll keep everybody informed once I receive it. But it was our draft that Brandon created. So, you know, what they have right now is essentially acceptable to us from a legal perspective. If they don't make a lot of changes, then it would just be a matter of the approval process. Just a reminder of the proposed schedule would be the transition happens between March and June, and then Laketran would assume operation of Geauga Transit in July of 2023. Any questions about that? Okay. IT strategic plan, we did an initial kickoff and fact-finding exercise, January 9th through the 11th. The consultant interviewed all the department heads and different groups from operations and maintenance. We're working on the existing conditions report and kind of foundation of the report. If I get any drafts that are sort of meaningful, I'll give those to the board to review. Service quality and extended service. I don't want to beat this too much because we had a special meeting this month to talk about this. So there hasn't been a lot of changes since the special meeting. But as that progresses, I'll continue to give the board an update of where we're at and kind of where everything is at. We did complete a postcard for communication to the customers that I believe, Julia, was mailed out this week or is being mailed out this week. Gets mailed out tomorrow. So we are in the process of making sure all the riders are being communicated with about what's been going on and kind of what some of our challenges were. We have our employee engagement survey. So every 2 years, we do an employee engagement survey. The first one was done by Pradco in 2021. So this is a good way to say, you know, how do Laketran employees feel? Are they happy? Are they upset? What do we do well? What do we do poorly? The survey will have the exact same questions as the one done in 2021. So this will give us a good benchmark of have we improved? Have we done worse? Where are things at? That'll be presented to the board once we have the results, probably in March. It will depend on how quickly they compile them, but that'll give us some, this will be the first time we'll have comparable results, which will be nice to let us know if we're going, you know, making strides, areas we need to improve. But it'll give us a good kind of gauge of where the employees are. The grant tracker, there wasn't really any activity for the last couple months, so we're doing a reset next month. So we're going to kind of clear off the old information and start a new grant tracker for the beginning of 2023. We'll still have the old information if anyone wants it, but the grant season is going to start up here in a couple months, and so with this being a newer thing, we're trying to make sure we could make it digestible to the board and not have too much information. So we're going to kind of reset that next month. There is one grant that I should mention that's not really on here because there's no local match required right now. We were approached by the county to do a joint application for a workforce development grant that would help, that would fund some of our CDL training if it was awarded. So I met with Joel DeMare from Lake County to talk about the process, and it's a grant specifically for folks over 55 to try and help them find employment, and it would sort of link them to the Office of Ohio Means Jobs and Laketran for training and kind of a holistic employment process. So it would help us potentially receive their drivers, and then the grant would pay for their CDL training. So that would be beneficial if we were to win it. That is it, unless anybody has any questions for my report. I would turn it over to Special Projects Committee.
All right, thank you, Ben. I will turn it over to Mr. Zippel for the Special Projects Committee.
Special Projects Committee did meet on January 17th. The agenda had 2 items on it. One was a review of the bids and recommendation that we talked about earlier in the meeting here tonight, so I won't spend any more time really talking about that. The second topic was, should there be committees of the BT or the Board of Trustees? So we spent most of the meeting talking about the building, so there was not in-depth, great amount of detail discussed about the committees, but the committee did say at the end that they felt there was interest in creating committees for the Board of Trustees, and that we should do something to move forward with getting committees established, or at least identified, and figured out what we wanted to do with them. We did spend some time talking about what the expectations of the committees were. And a lot of these next few comments are going to be some of my own personal interpretations of what we had. Plain, certainly correct me if I'm leaving them or follow on these, but we certainly need to, in my mind, we need to make sure that we know why we're making up these project or these special committees or committees, whether they be standing or ad hoc type committees. The bylaws already give us the authority to create ad hoc committees and also special committees, and or any other committees that we so choose to do. So the way the bylaws are written, we already have some of that ability to do that. The revisions in that area that are being proposed at this time are minor, to make, in my mind, minor to make some changes to how the committees are established. But the big thing is, if we go forward with a lot of these committees, they should be well defined as to what their purpose is, so that we don't give the diversion away from what the real purpose of the committee is. There is probably a requirement to make sure that there's 4 board members on each one of the committees. And a lot of the reason for that is that if you have 5, and that's a majority of the board, so you can't have that. And if you have 3, then if there's 2 of us that want to talk amongst ourselves, that has to be in an open meeting also. So 4, at least we can meet all the shiny rules along those lines. One of the comments that was made during the discussion with this projects committee was committees can do a lot of the heavy lifting. We delved into that a little bit, and I think a lot of the definition of heavy lifting is look into aspects or issues or concerns that need to have more in-depth type evaluation done on them, or look at, so that we can make a recommendation back to the board. Some of it, I wonder how many times during the year would we really need to have something like that done? So that's one of the questions. But again, having a well-defined purpose for what that committee is about. Some of the committees, if we do put those together, how often would they have to meet? Some of them might have to meet monthly if there's some issues coming up that need to have a lot of discussion or a lot of input into. So we got to be prepared to have those extra meetings come up during the month too, that take care of those. It'd be also my opinion that if we were to define some standing committee meetings, that those really should be placed in the rules and regulations, so that going forward we know what those committees, what the definition of those are. So again, it's recommendation or the comment committee was that we should look into more committee type detail and see where we go from there. So I guess I would leave it up to this board to kind of give some directions to how to go forward with it. A couple of thoughts I have on it would be have some type of an open workshop session where that's all we talk about at that meeting, no decisions being made or anything, just open workshop. Establish a committee. Look at whether or not meet committees. Or we could roll it into some of the strategic planning efforts that we may do here in the near future. So then that is what's your direction back?
I think we decided the 2 committees that would be most beneficial were a finance committee and an operations committee.
That's correct. Thank you.
So that's where we have to look to start establishing these committees.
Thank you.
So out of the special projects committee, I interpret it as the special projects committee is sending it to the board to decide if the board would like to have committees. Is that fair or not?
The four of us said that we think committees would be of value, and the two that Wayne mentioned, there would be some value in those. But yeah, there needs to be much more discussion about what the purpose of those committees would be and how often do they meet and how they would be structured. Things like that.
So would some sort of survey be appropriate to see if people are interested in committees, not interested in committees?
That would help in terms of direction, I guess, to see where you might go with it.
Okay, I mean, that's kind of my initial thought, is to take a temperature and see where everyone's at in terms of committees. Presuming that if there were two committees, a financial committee and an operations committee, that would mean everyone would be committing, if we divided it up evenly, another day a month to a meeting in Laketran, and then if you added special projects or rules and regulations, it could be a couple more meetings a month. Is that a fair statement?
I would say so, yes.
Okay. Did anyone have any questions for Lane or Chuck on committees, or want to have any discussion on committees at the moment? Thank you very much. Okay. Full business. So it looks like we have rules and regulations on here. So there's really kind of three things that are going on now that we're through the building project, at least getting that up and running. One of them will be what, if anything, we decide to do with committees. The rules and regulations, we, I think all agree and determine need to be updated. And then we also have strategic planning, which I believe Ben has started doing some initial work on that.
My intent was once we got the building kind of behind us, the board then could shift its focus to a strategic planning effort. I haven't really done anything yet, but I know we've talked about it on the phone a couple times, and you know, we can certainly put together the scope for a consultant for the board to review and consider.
So I think we'll get to work on figuring out a survey on the committees, and then determine if rules and regulations should either be a separate committee or somehow incorporated into a strategic plan, or should it be none of those things? And then we can all kind of chat about that as we move forward. But those are kind of the next three objectives I have on a short to-do list, and welcome any feedback, thoughts, or comments from anyone.
I would also maybe add just a workshop session.
Just to discuss these matters in more detail.
Yeah.
Okay. Appropriate. Any other thoughts or comments?
Do committee meetings and all the like need to be on Zoom?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, they would need to be a public meeting. Any other old business in the room? Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. So when are we leaving it as far as the rules and regulations and we're going to keep discussing it, or we're going to keep figuring out?
I think right now we'll start with the committees, see where we're at with an interest in committees or not in committees. If there is an interest in committees, there could potentially be a rules and regulations committee where a few members work with our legal counsel to determine that, or the rules and regulations could be incorporated in a strategic plan. But I think we'll chop it off with committees first, and then that'll find a place for rules and regulations when Ben is working on the strategic plan right now.
Okay, thank you.
So that should be about as clear as mud. Okay, no.
We have one more thing that we haven't decided on. I think the legal representation of Brandon's firm with Todd being a part of the negotiating committee. And it said he's had some other meetings with us. Todd is, I think, his name. I believe that Todd should be continue to be in the meetings with the union and Ben and whoever else is involved. And I think we should have a vote on that.
So you're asking, or you're making a motion for, Mr. Hicks to be incorporated into all of the union negotiations?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second for that?
What's currently being done?
Yeah, Mr. President, just want to make sure, I mean.
I was gonna do a second and then I was gonna ask for discussion, but if you think there's a better order,
No,
I'm happy to
I guess
entertain that.
I think we moved to new business now, I understand, I don't know if we did that officially, and if this is under new business, then we're still talking rules and regulations, I think. You answered the Stanger's question, and that seemed to include, we hadn't closed old business, we've done new business yet. Correct? Or did I miss that?
This is part of it.
Kind of happens. Okay.
Well, they were saying it was old because
We talked about it before, and it's old business to me. But I'm gonna actually put it in new business. Put it in German for all I care.
So I just want to make sure we understood exactly. You entertained it, and from Mr. Sheets bringing it up, and so it's certainly appropriate. I just wanted to know.
Sure, so Mr. Sheets made a motion, if there's a second, we would then move to, discussion, and I'm interpreting Mr. Sheets' motion to be that Mr. Hicks would be, involved at the table in the negotiations.
Yes.
Okay, is there a second to Mr. Sheets' motion? Seconded by Ms. Nunnally. At this time, I would like to open it up for discussion.
I just could you remind us where things stand?
Where things stand is Mr. Hicks is involved in an advisory capacity. I believe that's a fair statement. And Mr. Dines is also involved in an advisory capacity at this time.
So that's like special one-off meetings, if you guys are meeting separately in advance, and then you're going to the union, just trying to understand.
Yeah.
I know you said earlier you had discussions with them, but.
Yeah, so I just remind the board, we're in public session on YouTube right now. So Todd is involved in the negotiating process by talking to me and my team, reviewing all our proposals. He will also review any contract changes at the end to make sure everything is appropriate. So he will be reviewing everything that is put forth in the agreement and that the board sees as part of the process. He is not scheduled to sit at the table with us in the room when we are exchanging ideas between us and the union, unless we reach an impasse. If there's a time that we can't agree on something, then he would be part of the conversation. When we met with him in advance, he was in agreement with our strategy and thought, based on our relationship, that it was a good way to move forward, and was supportive of sort of the conversation that we had last time in executive session.
Any other discussion on the topic? Trudy, could you please call the roll?
Epic,
No.
Dudley,
No.
Pismo, no. Sheets,
Yes.
Sanger, no. Zimmer.
No.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I believe I'm now moving on to the new business section. Was there any new business in the room?
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to request Mr. Dines draft a resolution requiring board approval of non-union pay increases prior to their implementation.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Nunnally. At this time, if there's any discussion, I would open up the floor for that. Seeing none, Trudy, can you please call the roll?
Epic,
Yes.
Dudley,
Yes.
Pismo, yes. Sheets,
Yes.
Stanger? Yes. Zibble?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Is there any new business, any other new business in the room? Seeing none, at this time, is there a motion to adjourn today's Board of Trustees meeting? Motion made by Ms. Nunley. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Stanger. Trudy, if you could please call the roll.
Epic?
Yes.
Nunley? Yes. Beesmo? Yes. Sweets?
Yes.
Stanger? Yes. Zibble?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned at 6:17 PM.